Alrighty. All right, everybody. Well, welcome back to the ACU Foundation Center for Criminal Justice Reform Facebook Live. We are here today for our second installment of our web series here with Dan Schneider. Dan, you are the Executive Director of the American Conservative Union. First and foremost, thank you very much for taking some time to be with us to talk criminal justice reform, conservatism, anything really.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.
So first and foremost, as the Executive Director of the American Conservative Union, can you give everyone a rundown of what is conservatism? What do we believe in here?
So, of course, Patrick, you're trying to see if I know my own definition.
Of course.
But as people...
We ask the hard questions here.
As Zach Crandall tries to call me back now. I'm going to put you on the spot. What is conservatism?
Conservatism, as you put it greatly every time, is the idea that sovereignty resides in the individual. And that is kind of the overarching kind of theme of what we believe in, what we kind of craft our policies around, and what we really strive to get from our government.
That's right. Well, so in 9 words, I always try to explain that conservatism is the political philosophy that sovereignty resides in the person.
Mm-hmm.
So conservatism is a philosophy. It's not a mere ideology. It's a philosophy. And this philosophy goes back to Aristotle and the early Greek thinkers. It is built on natural law, the idea that our rights are natural to us. For people of faith, we can say that God gives us our rights. People without faith, we just have our rights because we are human.
Mm-hmm.
But the whole idea is premised on the proposition that government does not give you your rights. The king does not give you your rights. You have those rights by virtue of your existence. Mm-hmm. So that's where conservatism begins, as this philosophy. And then as a conservative, we believe, and this is based on the Declaration of Independence, that the central role of government is to defend life, liberty, and property. And we're here, I think, primarily to talk about that second part today, liberty.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and when you bring up liberty, obviously, one thing that you think of is the government's ability to take that liberty away from you through incarceration, through any sort of correctional supervision, and that's kind of where the Center for Criminal Justice Reform comes into the ACU, and under the ACUF umbrella is, really looking at liberty. How does the government, how can they affect one's liberty, and how can...
Well, again, getting back to the Declaration of Independence, the second role of government is to defend liberty. And of course, you asked the question, when does government take that liberty away? But to understand that second thing, you first have to understand the premise that government is to defend one's liberty, your right to move freely, to assemble, to meet with whom you want, to live as you wish. And so if government takes that away and incarcerates somebody, that's just about the worst thing that government can possibly do. So before we take away somebody's liberty and put them in a tiny 6 by 8 foot cell, we better be really sure that society, the health and well-being of society, requires that somebody be put in a little block and have their liberty taken away.
Mm-hmm. And when you say they have to do something that requires them to do that, that's kind of where the gray area comes in, and that's where there's different arguments about what really constitutes being required from being separated from society, from being pulled away from your family and locked in a box. And,
well, of course, Pat Nolan, the great Pat Nolan, has coined the phrase that we end up locking up people we're mad at, as opposed to people who
we're afraid of.
We're afraid of, right. So clearly, if you look throughout history, there are dangerous people who mean harm to others. And the only way to deal with those people is to deprive them of their liberty. But we have to do that in a very careful and structured way to protect their rights. And our Constitution, of course, provides a number of mechanisms to protect the accused from imprisonment until finally adjudicated. And that is where we need to return. Right now, we have in an effort to protect society, we have made it easier to incarcerate people, and we are incarcerating people at too great a frequency. We are incarcerating people who, sure, they've committed crimes, but are they actually dangerous to us? Do they actually need to be in a box? No, too many people are being incarcerated today.
And, along with too many people being incarcerated, there's, the other half of the problem that there's people that are being incarcerated for, something that is a nonviolent offense. It's not hurting anybody, but then they're going in and they're coming out worse than they went in. We are sending people, we're locking people up, making them worse, and then releasing them back into our community.
Right. Yeah. So the first part of that, people who are not dangerous. Martha Stewart went to prison for something that people do every day. Thousands of people do every day, which is make a little fib to a law enforcement officer. Now, obviously, we do not condone fibbing or lying to law enforcement. But we also hardly ever put anybody in prison who does that. Why did Martha Stewart go to prison? Because she's a big name. Somebody thought that they could make a career off of putting her in prison. Yeah. Was she a threat to anybody? No. Did her action require incarcerating her? No. She, of course, did not come back a hardened criminal. That's the second part. But that's right. Our prisons oftentimes are the universities of crime, where people go and learn then how to be a criminal, or they experience such horrific things that they come out really compromised.
Well, actually, what we'll do is we'll backtrack a little bit to before, and you were talking about the unalienable rights that we have as humans or have from God or in the Constitution, life, liberty, and property. And that third one, property. You're a big proponent for property rights in any form, intellectual, personal.
Yeah. Before I start getting tweets that people think I'm not quoting the Declaration correctly, the Declaration of Independence says that among these rights are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That phrase, the pursuit of happiness, was used as a substitute for property, because at the time of our Declaration, everybody knows that we had Southern colonists who owned slaves. So our founding fathers had to find a substitute for the word property initially, because they knew that that issue of whether a person could be property would have to be resolved later. So the old Aristotelian idea of life, liberty, and property, the old Greek, there's a Greek term for, that means the fulfillment of life, using all the possessions you have. That's what that pursuit of happiness is a substitute for. Then, of course, in our Fifth Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, it does very specifically state life, liberty, and property. So yes, we fight for all three forms, life, liberty, and property. And within this criminal justice context, the big issue right now on property is asset forfeiture.
And that's, when you bring up asset forfeiture, I want to pose a question to our Facebook audience here, and that is, in 2015, how many assets, how much money worth of assets do you think the government seized from innocent American property owners? And, we'll get back, I'll get you that answer after we get a little explanation from you on, kind of how asset forfeiture puts people at risk of property rights violations, puts people at risk of an overbearing government.
Yeah, okay, well, what is asset forfeiture? Well, asset forfeiture is a law enforcement body, federal or state, confiscating somebody's assets, a car, a motel, something they own, their cash.
Cash is a big one.
Something they possess, because there is an idea that somebody has been engaged in a crime. How is and so their assets are taken from them, even without an accusation of malfeasance, without an accusation that a crime has even been committed. The theory here is that it's not the person who committed the crime, and thus we don't owe the person due process. It's the asset that has committed the crime. The motel has committed the crime. The car has committed the crime. The cash has committed the crime. So that asset is being arrested. It's an absurd hypothetical, an absurd fiction, a legal fiction. But that's what asset forfeiture is. It's accusing the asset of committing a crime, and essentially the asset is being arrested. So then for the owner to get their asset back, they have to prove, they have to bring evidence in to get their stuff back, which of course turns our constitutional criminal law requirements on its head, where we don't, the accused does not have the burden of proof. It's the state, it's the prosecutor who has a burden of proof that somebody has in fact committed a crime. So, with civil asset forfeiture, the owner of the property loses everything they have, and then they've got to prove their own innocence or the innocence of the property to get it back.
And they have to fight the government without any of their assets to get it back.
Right, and government, there's one attorney general, state attorney general I was talking to, and he explained to me that in his state, 70% of the assets, the resources used by law enforcement to fund their operations comes through asset forfeiture. So they are highly incentivized to take people's property. It's how they pay for their own work.
And that's, with that being said, asset forfeiture reform isn't anti-law enforcement.
Correct.
At all. It's, sticking up for the little guy who, has someone come in and trying to take their assets. And, sticking up for the person that has to then fight the government.
No, asset forfeiture came to fruition when you had all of these drug runners, and people thought, wouldn't it be neat if we could take their boats, confiscate their boats, as they're running up from Colombia into Florida. We could shut down these drug runners if we took their assets, and that kind of made some nice sense. So there would be a way where we keep our asset forfeiture laws, but where the accused first has rights, where the property is not taken without some sort of actual demonstration of a crime.
And back to our little trivia there. So in 2015, you might get a kick out of this one, the U.S. government took $5 billion.
I promise you, I'm not going to find this enjoyable.
You probably won't. You're right. The U.S. took $5 billion in assets through that.
Just the U.S. government.
The U.S. government through the asset forfeiture program.
$5 billion.
$5 billion with a B. In that same year, 2015, all burglaries in the United States, total of the assets taken, any guess?
Some number south of that.
$3.5 billion. So the government is taking $1.5 billion more dollars than burglars, the bad guys, are taking.
Yeah.
And that, for some people, might stick out as a problem.
Wow. That's pretty amazing.
It is. So there's your little trivia for the day, and there is a little background on conservatism and how conservatism plays into the criminal justice reform spectrum. My name again is Patrick Plain. I am a policy analyst here with the ACU Foundation Center for Criminal Justice Reform. And we were here today with Dan Schneider, who is the Executive Director of the American Conservative Union. Dan, thank you very much.
Patrick, thank you.